The twin suns burned high above the market of Zarvan, casting long shadows over the dusty stone streets. The air was thick with the smell of smoke, metal, and sweat. Hundreds of voices rose in a constant roar, sellers shouting prices, buyers arguing, guards barking orders. Rows of cages lined the marketplace. Some were made of steel, others of glowing energy bars that hummed with a dangerous sound. Inside each cage sat living beings from 100 different worlds, some silent in fear, some snarling in anger, some broken beyond hope. Near the center stood the largest cage of them all, placed high on a wooden stage so everyone could see. Inside, a young alien woman sat with her back against the bars, her wrists locked in glowing cuffs that pulsed faintly with blue light. She had smooth violet skin that shimmered faintly in the sunlight, hair like strands of silver silk and bright, golden eyes that watched everything with a mixture of fear and defiance. Her name was Lyra. Her own kind had betrayed her. Her own blood had sold her to the slavers. She had been taken from her home only 3 nights ago. Her village had been desperate, short on resources, threatened by raiders. And when the slavers came offering food and weapons in exchange for breeding stock, her people had chosen her. She was young, strong, and healthy. That made her valuable. The thought made her stomach twist. Now she sat in the cage, every sound of the market drilling into her mind. Somewhere deep in the crowd, the auctioneer's voice rang out. Rare beauty from the Valyrian bloodline. Strong, fertile, untouched. Who will start the bidding? Oh, men and women, alien and otherwise, gathered closer. Some wore fine robes, others thick armor. All of them looked at her the same way, not as a person, but as property. A tall, scaled alien male with silver fangs shouted the first bid. Another, a short reptilian merchant with jeweled rings, raised it higher. A 3-eyed warlord in crimson armor smirked and joined in. The prices climbed quickly. Lyra kept her face still, but her heart pounded. She would not give them the pleasure of seeing fear. And then she saw him. A human. He stood a little apart from the others, not jostling for position, not shouting to be heard. His clothes were plain, travel-worn. His face was calm, but his eyes, sharp and steady, never left her. Lyra had never seen a human before. In her world, they were whispered about, unpredictable, dangerous, strange. But in that moment, she felt something else from him. Not hunger, not cruelty.
It's something quieter.
The bidding reached its peak. The silver-fanged alien smirked. Sure, he would win. The auctioneer was already raising his hand to declare the sale. That's when the human stepped forward. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise like a blade. I'll pay double. The crowd froze. Heads turned. Even the auctioneer blinked in surprise. The silver-fanged alien's expression twisted into rage. This is not for humans, he growled, stepping closer. The human didn't move. It is now. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the market. No human had ever bought a breeding slave from this place. Not openly, not without fear. The alien guards at the stage shifted uneasily, unsure what to do. The auctioneer licked his lips, torn between the threat of angering the other buyers and the lure of such a large payment. The human's voice stayed calm. Transfer her to me, and the credits are yours. Now. After a long, tense pause, the auctioneer nodded. The cage was lowered, the locks undone. Lyra felt the cuffs loosen from her wrists. She stepped out onto the dusty stage, unsure whether she should be relieved or more afraid. Why would a human pay so much for her? What did he want? The human offered. His hand? She didn't take it. He didn't seem offended. Walk, he said simply, and stepped down from the stage. The crowd parted as they passed. Some stared in shock, others in hatred. The silver-fanged alien was still watching, his eyes promising violence. Lyra followed, her mind spinning. This was no rescue. No one risked that much money for nothing. But as she glanced at the human's back, she noticed something strange. His shoulders were tense, not with greed, but with readiness, like he was expecting an attack at any moment. And he was right. They were halfway down the street. When she heard the hiss of a blaster charging, the human moved instantly, pushing. her behind him as a shot exploded against a wall. The silver-fanged alien's men were here. The market erupted into chaos. Vendors grabbed their goods and ran. Buyers ducked for cover. Guards shouted, trying to control the panic. The human pulled a small pistol from his belt and fired back, hitting one attacker in the shoulder. Then he grabbed Lyra's arm, not roughly, but firmly, and pulled her toward a narrow alley between two buildings. She stumbled after him, dust stinging her eyes, her heart pounding in her chest. He didn't slow, even when another shot sizzled past his head. Who was this man? Why was he fighting for her? And what would happen if they didn't escape? The sound of pursuit echoed behind them, boots pounding on stone. The human glanced over his shoulder once, then pulled a small device from his pocket and tossed it into the street. It exploded with a burst of white smoke, covering their trail. By the time the attackers reached the alley, the human and Lyra were gone. The smoke still hung in the air behind them, drifting slowly across the marketplace. The noise of shouts and blaster fire faded as the human led Lyra deeper into the maze of narrow alleys. His grip on her arm was steady, but not cruel, guiding her quickly over uneven stone paths and under hanging laundry that swayed in the hot wind. Lyra's heart was still pounding. Every sound made her jump, the clang of a distant gate, the bark of a street vendor, the hum of a passing hoverbike. She kept glancing back, certain that any second, the silver-fanged alien's thugs would appear. The human didn't speak until they reached a small courtyard surrounded by high walls. In the center, a rusted fountain stood dry and cracked. Stopped, scanning the shadows before letting go of her arm. "Stay here," he said. Lyra's golden eyes narrowed. "You bought me? What happens now?" He met her gaze for the first time since they left the stage. His eyes were a deep, steady gray, not cold, but unreadable. "Now, you're not their property." She almost laughed, but there was no humor in it, "and I'm yours instead?" Something flickered in his expression, but it was gone too fast to read. "You can believe whatever you want. Just know this, I didn't pay for you to be a slave." Before she could ask why, the sound of heavy boots echoed from one of the side alleys. The human's head turned sharply. His hand dropped to the weapon at his hip. 3 figures emerged, alien guards in black armor, the crest of the market's enforcers painted in red on their chests. The leader, a broad-shouldered brute with tusks curling from his jaw, stepped forward. "You made a mistake, human," he growled. "That girl was promised to someone else." The human didn't move. "I paid the price." The tusked alien smiled, showing yellowed teeth. "You paid credits. He paid in blood. And that means you leave her, or you don't leave at all." Hands tightened into fists. She didn't know why, but she hated the thought of being dragged back to that stage, back into the hands of the silver-fanged alien. The human's voice was calm, almost too calm. "If you want her, you'll have to take her from me." The alien laughed, a deep, ugly sound, and motioned to his men. They moved forward. It happened fast. The first guard reached for his weapon, but the human was quicker. His blaster flashed, striking the alien in the leg. The second charged with a blade, but the human sidestepped, grabbing his arm and slamming him into the wall. The third hesitated, then bolted back into the alley. The tusked leader snarled, drawing his own weapon, a heavy scatter pistol. Lyra's eyes widened, knowing one blast could end the human in an instant. But before the alien could fire, the human threw something small and metallic to the ground. It released a burst of light so bright it turned the world white for a heartbeat. When her vision cleared, the human was already moving. Pulling her toward another exit from the courtyard, they ran again through twisting lanes, across bridges of steel, past shouting vendors who cursed them for knocking over their stalls. Finally, they slowed inside a long, shadowed tunnel that smelled faintly of damp metal. The noise of the city was distant here, muffled by the thick walls. The human leaned against the wall, catching his breath. Lyra kept her distance, watching him. Her voice was quiet but edged with suspicion. "You fight like someone who's done it too many times." He glanced at her. "Maybe I have." "Why?" she asked. "Why risk this? You could have walked away." For a moment, he didn't answer. His gaze shifted down the tunnel as if he was checking for danger. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower. "'Cause I've seen chains before, and I've seen what they do to people. I'm not letting it happen again." There was something in the way he said it, a weight that made her think of a story he wasn't telling yet, before she could push him for more. A sound reached them, faint, metallic, rhythmic. Footsteps. The human's hand went to his weapon. Instantly, he motioned for her to stay close to the wall. Out of the shadows at the far end of the tunnel, two figures appeared. Not guards this time, but cloaked in dark, hooded robes. They moved slowly, deliberately, their faces hidden. Lyra felt her chest tighten. Something about them was wrong. Too quiet, too controlled. The human's voice was barely a whisper. Not market guards, bounty hunters. One of the hooded figures spoke, a voice like cold stone scraping metal. "You have something valuable, human. Hand her over, and we'll let you keep your life." The human didn't answer. The second figure reached into his cloak, pulling out a long, needle-thin blade that shimmered with poison along its edge. Lyra's instincts screamed that these weren't men who made threats twice. The first bounty hunter stepped forward. The human didn't back away. Instead, he moved toward them. His blaster held low but ready. The tunnel erupted into motion. The poisoned blade struck first, slicing the air where the human had been a second earlier. He rolled aside, firing. Once the shot caught the blade wielder in the shoulder, spinning him back, the second bounty hunter lunged, trying to grab Lyra. She reacted without thinking, ducking under his arms and shoving him into the wall with all the strength she had left. The human moved fast, striking the attacker with the butt of his blaster. The figure crumpled, motionless. For a moment, the tunnel was silent again, except for the echo of their breathing. The human glanced at her. "You can fight." She lifted her chin. "Not as weak as I look." A faint smile touched his lips, but it was gone quickly. "Good, because this isn't over." He motioned for her to follow, and they slipped out of the tunnel into the dim light of the lower city. Above them, the market still roared, but here, in the shadows, the hunt had already begun. The lower city smelled of oil and burning metal. Pipes hissed steam from the walls and neon lights flickered weakly in the gloom. The human moved quickly, his eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. Lyra followed close, her bare feet silent. On the rust-stained ground, she could hear the hum of hoverbikes above, faint but steady. Somewhere up there, the bounty hunters would be regrouping. Somewhere behind them, the silver-fanged aliens' men would still be searching. The human turned sharply into a narrow passage between two leaning towers. The walls were so close she could feel the cold metal on her arms. They emerged into a wider street lit by red lanterns, where a handful of night vendors were selling steaming bowls of food to tired workers. Lyra's golden eyes kept moving, scanning faces. She didn't trust this sudden calm. Neither did he. A shout tore through the air. There. 4 mercenaries burst from a side street, tall, armored, carrying heavy rifles. The human didn't hesitate. He grabbed Lyra's wrist and pulled her into a sprint, weaving through the startled vendors. Steam rose around them as pots crashed. To the ground, blaster fire lit up the red lanterns, sending shards of glass and burning oil into the air. One shot struck a wall beside Lyra's head, showering her with fragments of stone. She stumbled, but the human's grip yanked her back into motion. "Left," he barked. They darted down a ramp that spiraled toward the industrial docks below. The air grew hotter, filled with the deep rumble of engines. Down here, massive cargo haulers loomed like metal giants, their bellies open as workers loaded crates under dim lights. The mercenaries didn't stop. They charged after them, boots pounding on the steel floor. The human's eyes flicked to a stack of fuel canisters by the dock wall. He fired a quick shot into one, and it exploded in a burst of fire that threw heat and smoke across the ramp. The workers shouted and ran, the chaos giving them a few precious seconds. Lyra coughed in the thick smoke, but kept running. Her legs burned, her lungs ached, but she could feel the danger pressing closer. They slipped between two huge cargo ships, the shadows swallowing them. The human slowed, motioning for her to stay low, through the gaps in the metal plating. Lyra saw their pursuers spread out, searching the docks. One of them carried a scanning device that pulsed with blue light. She realized it was tracking her life signature. The human saw it too. He leaned close, speaking low. "We need to lose them before that thing locks on." He glanced up at the ship above them. It was a heavy freighter, and its main loading ramp was raised. Thin maintenance ladder ran along the side, up toward the upper decks. "Can you climb?" he asked. Lyra nodded. Even though her arms were still sore from the cuffs, they started up the ladder, moving fast but careful not to rattle it too much. Halfway up, a shout rose from below. One of the mercenaries had spotted them. The human didn't look down. "Keep going," he said. Blaster fire streaked past, one shot sparking against the ladder inches from Lyra's foot. She bit her lip and climbed faster, her fingers aching as they gripped the cold metal. They reached the deck and rolled over the edge. Just as another volley of shots lit up the air, the human pulled her toward a row of stacked supply crates. From here they could see almost the entire dock, the mercenaries scattering, some circling around to cut them off. The human pulled a small device from his belt and pressed a button. Somewhere deep inside the freighter, alarms began to wail. "What did you do?" she asked, wide-eyed. "Started a fire in the engine room," he said calmly. "They'll evacuate the ship. That'll give us cover." Sure enough, a moment later, thick black smoke began pouring from the freighter's vents. Crew members ran past them, shouting in panic. The mercenaries hesitated, some turning to see what was happening. The human took the chance, guiding Lyra toward the far side of the dock. But as they neared the exit, a shadow stepped into their path, tall, broad, and all too familiar. The silver-fanged alien. His eyes glinted with triumph. Behind him, two more armed guards appeared, cutting off the escape route. "You think you can steal from me, human?" the alien growled, his voice dripped with venom. "You don't know who you're dealing with?" The human didn't blink. "I know enough. You sell lives like they're nothing. I'm not letting you take hers." The alien's lips curled into a sharp smile. "Then you die with her." Before he could give the order, the deck beneath them shuddered. The fire in the freighter's engine room had reached something volatile. A deep booming explosion ripped through the dock, sending a wall of heat and flame across the platform. The blast threw everyone off balance. Lyra stumbled, but the human caught her, pulling her through the smoke and heat. The silver-fanged alien roared behind them, shouting for his men to follow. They ran toward the far gate, the fire lighting their path. The air was thick with sparks. An ash, a group of dock workers, panicked and shouting, burst through the same gate. Knocking one of the alien guards aside, the human used the opening, shoving past and dragging Lyra with him into the dark streets beyond the dock. Only when the sound of pursuit finally faded did they stop. Ducking into the shadow of an old warehouse, Lyra's chest rose and fell quickly. Her voice was hoarse when she spoke. You could have left me. In the market, in the tunnel, even now." Looked at her, his gray eyes steady. "I told you, I'm not letting them take you back." For a moment, neither spoke. The warehouse smelled of dust and old machinery. Somewhere in the distance, the city roared on, uncaring. Lyra didn't trust him fully, not yet. But for the first time since her capture, she felt a thread of hope. Thin but real. And she knew one thing: the fight wasn't over. The warehouse door creaked as the human pushed it open. Inside, the air was cool and heavy with the scent of rust and dust. The room was wide and dark, with beams of pale light cutting through cracks in the roof. Old machines sat silent, covered in thick layers of grime. "This will do," he said quietly, scanning the shadows. Lyra stepped in slowly, her bare feet brushing against scattered bolts and old wiring. She kept glancing over her shoulder, half expecting the silver-fanged alien to appear in the doorway. "Is it safe?" she asked. "For now," he replied, closing the door behind them and sliding a heavy steel bar into place. The sound echoed through the empty space, a solid reminder that at least here, no one could walk in easily. He moved toward the far wall, pulling aside a faded tarp to reveal a small control panel. With a flick of a switch, a row of old lights buzzed to life overhead. Throwing the warehouse into dim but steady illumination, Lyra stood in the middle of the floor, her golden eyes tracking his every move. "You still haven't told me why you're doing this." The human glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Does it matter?" "Yes," she said firmly. "If you want me to trust you, I need to know." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he began checking the windows, locking the ones that could be secured and blocking the rest with scrap metal. Only after he finished did he turn back to her. "My name is Cale." "No," he said simply. It was the first time he'd told her his name. "I had a sister once," he continued. "Slavers took her. I never saw her again. I was younger then, weaker. I swore I'd never let it happen to anyone else if I could stop it." Lyra didn't speak for a moment. She wasn't sure what to feel, pity, respect, or something else. "And you think saving me makes up for that?" Cale's eyes darkened. "Nothing makes up for it. But I'll take every chance I get to stop men like the one who bought you." Before she could respond, a sound from outside made them both freeze, the faint crunch of boots on gravel. Cale moved quickly, crossing the floor to a small table near the wall. He pulled out 2 compact blasters and handed one to her. "I don't use weapons," she said, frowning. "You might need to," he replied. "If they find us, you shoot. You don't hesitate." She looked at the weapon in her hands, its cold weight unfamiliar. "What if I miss?" "Then you try again," he said flatly. The footsteps outside grew louder, stopping near the warehouse. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. Cale crouched low, moving toward a narrow gap between the wall and the doorframe. Through it, he could see the silhouette of 2 figures standing in the dim alley light. They were speaking in low voices, one of them holding something that glowed faintly. "They're scanning for life signatures," Cale whispered. Lyra's grip on the blaster tightened. Cale moved silently toward the side wall where an old loading hatch sat rusted shut. He forced it open just enough to peer through. The alley beyond was empty for now. "They'll circle the building," he murmured. "We have to move before they do." Without another word, he crossed back to her, motioning toward the far end of the warehouse where a set of metal stairs led up to a narrow catwalk. Lyra followed, her bare feet making no sound against the cold steel. From the catwalk, they moved toward a second-floor storage room that overlooked the alley. The air here was thicker, filled with dust that made her want to cough, but she kept silent. Cale pushed open a small window, just enough to slip through. He landed softly on the flat roof outside and helped her climb after him. The night air was cooler up here, carrying the scent of rain. Across the rooftops, the city stretched out a maze of steel and neon, full of places to hide, but also full of eyes that might see them. They moved quickly, staying low as they crossed from one roof to another. Below, the 2 figures at the warehouse door finally moved. Stepping inside, "They'll know we were there," Lyra whispered. "They were going to find out anyway," Cale said. They dropped down into another alley, landing behind a stack of metal crates. Here, tucked between 2 old repair shops, stood a small, unmarked door. Cale punched a code into the panel beside it, and with a soft click, the door swung open. Inside was a much smaller space, dimly lit, with bare walls and a single cot pushed against the corner. A shelf held a few ration packs, water bottles, and a med kit. "This is it?" Lyra asked, stepping inside. "It's safe," Cale said. "That's all that matters." She moved toward the cot, sitting down slowly. For the first time since her capture, she felt the smallest sense of relief. But it was fragile, thin enough to break at any sound. Cale dropped his pack on the floor and sat across from her. "Can't stay here long. By morning, they'll have half the lower city looking for us." Lyra looked at him.
"Then why?"
"Stop it all. Because you need rest, and I need to think." She studied him in the dim light. He was still calm, but she could see the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers tapped against his knee. He was planning, thinking 3 steps ahead, and for some reason that made her feel safer. But outside in the dark streets, the hunt continued. The night outside was silent at first, too silent. Lyra lay on the cot, eyes open, staring at the cracked ceiling. She could hear Cale moving around the small safe house, checking the locks for the 5th time, loading weapons, placing small devices along the walls. He didn't speak, but every movement felt sharp, deliberate. Something was coming. She could feel it. Cale finally stopped by the window, looking out into the dark alley. "They've found us," he said softly. Lyra sat up quickly.
Ow.
"You know," he stepped away from the glass, "because it's been quiet for too long. And because I saw the reflection of a scope in the rainwater on the street." A faint metallic click echoed in the distance, followed by another. They weren't footsteps. They were the sound of weapons being readied. Cale's voice stayed calm, but his eyes were hard. "They're not going to knock. When they come, it'll be fast." He handed her a small earpiece. "Put it on. We get separated. I'll guide you." Her hand shook slightly as she placed it in her ear. "What if they surround us?" "They will," he said. "We just have to break through before they close the trap." The first sign came as a shadow, moving past the door's gap. Then another. Then 3 more. Cale motioned for her to stay low. He crouched by the entrance, a grenade-sized device in his hand. When the door finally burst inward with a sharp crash, he tossed it across the floor. The device exploded in a blinding flash and a deafening crack. Armed figures stumbled back, their weapons firing wildly. Cale moved like lightning, pulling Lyra toward the back exit while firing short, precise bursts into the smoke. They made it halfway across the room when the side wall blew inward. Metal shards sprayed through the air, and 2 armored attackers poured through the opening. One of them lunged at Cale with a shock baton. Cale blocked the strike with his forearm, twisted the attacker's wrist, and drove his knee into the alien's chest. The second attacker raised a rifle, but Lyra moved before she could think. She fired her blaster. The shot hit the alien in the shoulder, sending him crashing into the wall. "Nice shot," Cale said, grabbing her arm. "Move." They darted into the narrow corridor at the back of the safe house. The air smelled of smoke and scorched metal. Behind them, the front room filled with the sound of boots and shouts. Cale led her to a reinforced door and keyed in a short code, slid open, revealing a dim stairwell leading down into the darkness. "They'll follow us," Lyra said. "They'll try," Cale replied. They descended quickly, their footsteps echoing off the metal steps. The air grew colder as they reached the bottom, where a long, low tunnel stretched ahead. "This leads to the old tram lines," Cale said. "If we can get there, we can vanish into the city." They had gone only a few meters when the ceiling above them shook violently. Dust rained down, and the sound of muffled explosions echoed through the tunnel. "They're collapsing the building," Lyra realized. Cale didn't answer. He pushed her forward faster. Halfway down the tunnel, a dark shape dropped from a hole in the ceiling, a tall figure in black armor. Moving with inhuman speed, Lyra barely had time to raise her weapon before the attacker struck, knocking her aside. Cale slammed into the figure, driving him back into the wall. The impact rang out like a bell. The armored alien fought with brutal strength, blocking Cale's strikes and throwing punches like sledgehammers. Cale ducked one blow, drove his elbow into the alien's neck, then shoved him into the corner. The alien swung a blade from his belt, but Cale caught his wrist and twisted hard until the weapon clattered to the floor. "Go!" Cale shouted to Lyra. She hesitated. "Not without you." "Now." Her instincts screamed to run, but she grabbed the dropped blade instead and slashed at the alien's side. The armor sparked, and the attacker roared in pain. Cale used the distraction to slam the alien's head into the wall, sending him crumpling to the ground. They didn't wait to see if he was down for good. Together, they ran the rest of the tunnel until the walls opened into a massive underground chamber. The old tram lines lay before them, rusted rails stretching into the darkness. Overhead lights flickering weakly. Cale pulled a small device from his belt, activating a faint blue beacon. "This will bring a ride," he said. "A ride?" Lyra asked. "Not the kind you're thinking," he replied, before she could ask. A roar of engines echoed from deep in the tunnels. A small, battered hoverskiff shot into view. Its pilot, a wiry alien with cybernetic eyes, waving them aboard. Cale helped Lyra climb in as blaster fire rang out behind them, Rifles poured into the chamber, rifles blazing. The pilot gunned. The engines and the skiff shot forward. Weaving along the rusted tracks, the attackers chased for a while, their shots sparking off the walls. But the skiff's speed carried them deeper into the dark until the gunfire faded. Only then did Lyra finally breathe again. She looked at Cale, his face calm but alert, scanning the shadows ahead. "You knew they'd find us tonight, didn't you?" "Yes," he said. "And they will again." "Then where do we go now?" His eyes met hers. "Somewhere they won't expect, somewhere they won't be able to follow." The hover skiff burst out of the tunnels into the open night, racing across the cracked landing pads of the southern docks. The air smelled of salt and burning fuel. Giant cargo ships loomed overhead like sleeping beasts, their hull lights casting long, sharp shadows. Lyra clung to the side of the skiff, the wind stinging her face. Cale stood at the bow, scanning the maze of cranes and stacked containers ahead. The pilot angled them toward a smaller loading bay at the far edge of the docks. One with fewer guards, fewer lights, but fewer lights didn't mean fewer dangers. Cale's voice was tense. "They'll expect us to try the spaceport." "That means they'll be here before we are." He was right. As the skiff rounded a row of rusted fuel tanks, a blinding spotlight snapped on, locking them in a circle of harsh white light. Figures stepped out from behind the containers, mercenaries in black and red armor, rifles ready. More appeared on the overhead catwalks, aiming down at them. The pilot cursed and killed the engine. The skiff skidded to a stop. The leader of the mercenaries stepped forward. His helmet visor reflected the dock lights like a cold mirror. "End of the line, human. Hand over the girl, and you might walk away." Cale's voice was calm, but it carried across the space. "Not happening." The leader tilted his head. "Then this will be quick." The first shot rang out from above, but Cale was already moving. He shoved Lyra down behind a stack of metal crates and returned fire, hitting the sniper before he could take a second shot. The dock erupted into chaos, blaster fire cutting through the night, sparks leaping from the steel walls. Lyra pressed her back against the crate, heart hammering. She could hear Cale's shots, precise and fast. He moved like he'd been in fights like this 100 times before. Then a shadow loomed behind her. One of the mercenaries had flanked them, raising a short-barreled shotgun. Without thinking, Lyra kicked the crate toward him. It slammed into his legs, and he stumbled. She grabbed his arm, twisting until the weapon clattered to the ground. He lunged at her, but she drove her knee into his stomach, sending him crashing to the dock floor. Cale glanced over his shoulder, eyes meeting hers for a split second. Nice. But there was no time to celebrate. A deep, thunderous roar rolled across the docks, so loud it made the metal under their feet vibrate. From behind a row of shipping containers, something huge moved. The mercenary stepped aside as the silver-fanged alien walked into view, his smile sharp as a blade, and he wasn't alone. Beside him padded a massive beast, its body covered in thick scale-like plates, eyes glowing an unnatural yellow. Its mouth opened to reveal rows of serrated teeth, dripping with saliva that hissed where it hit the dock's metal floor. Lyra's stomach tightened. She'd heard of these creatures, war beasts bred for hunting in close quarters, trained to kill without hesitation. The silver-fanged alien spread his arms. "You've been troublesome, human. See how long you last against this." He gave a short, sharp whistle. The beast's muscles bunched, and then it charged. Cale pushed Lyra aside as the creature slammed into the crates, splintering them like paper. He fired 3 shots into its side, but the thick plates deflected most of the energy. The beast swung its head, its tail whipping around with enough force to dent the metal wall behind them. "Move!" Cale shouted, grabbing Lyra's arm as they dodged behind a crane support. The beast followed, claws tearing deep grooves in the dock floor. Lyra's mind raced. The blaster wouldn't penetrate its armor. They needed another way. Her eyes darted to the crane above, its heavy cargo hook hanging low. "Cale," she called. "The hook!" He followed her gaze, understanding instantly. "Get its attention," he said, her breath caught. "What now?" Before she could talk herself out. of it, Lyra stepped from behind the support and shouted at the beast. She waved her arms, her voice echoing across the docks. The war beast's head snapped toward her, its eyes burning with rage. It charged. She ran straight under the crane's hook. Heart pounding in her throat, Kale was already climbing the control ladder. He reached the lever and swung the massive hook down just as the beast lunged at her. The heavy steel slammed into the side of its head with a crack like shattering rock. The beast stumbled, roaring in pain. Lyra rolled to the side as Kale dropped from the crane, landing beside her. The mercenaries hesitated, unsure whether to fire or flee. The silver-fanged alien's smile was gone, replaced by a mask of fury. "You should have stayed out of this," he snarled. Kale raised his weapon. "You should have stayed out of my way." Before the alien could respond, Kale fired a single precise shot that knocked the weapon from his hand. "Boarding ramp," Kale shouted to Lyra. They sprinted toward the small freighter waiting at the far end of the dock. The pilot, the same wiry alien from before, was waving them aboard, engines already screaming. Behind them, the war beast staggered to its feet again, roaring. The silver-fanged alien shouted orders, its men firing wildly as Kale and Lyra dove up the ramp. The pilot slammed the controls, and the freighter lifted from the dock just as the beast leaped, its claws scraping the edge of the ramp before it fell back into the shadows. The city lights dropped away beneath them. Lyra stood at the viewport, watching the dock shrink into the distance. Kale joined her, its expression unreadable. "They won't stop," she said quietly. "No," he agreed, "but neither will we." The freighter's engines hummed as it sliced through the black of space, leaving the chaotic docks far behind. Inside the cabin, the smell of fuel mixed with the faint tank of ozone from the ship's weapon systems. Lyra sat by the viewport, her golden eyes watching the stars streak past. She wanted to believe they were safe now, but she knew better. Kale hadn't taken his hand off his weapon since they left the planet. The pilot glanced over his shoulder. "We've got a tail." One small cruiser, fast-armed and closing. Kale's jaw tightened. Silver-fanged Lyra turned sharply. "He's following us?" "He won't stop until you're back in chains," Kale said. The pilot adjusted the controls. "We can outrun him if we burn the engines hot enough, but it'll fry them in an hour?" Kale shook his head. "No, if we run, he keeps chasing. We end it here." Lyra's stomach tightened. "End it?" He met her gaze. "I'll never stop hunting you. The only way this ends is if he's gone for good." The pilot swore under his breath but began steering the freighter toward a dark shape ahead. It's a dead mining station floating in the shadow of a small moon. Its broken arms and shattered hull made it look abandoned, but it still had power. Kale's plan was simple: lure the cruiser inside, trap it, and finish the fight. As they approached, the mining station's jagged docking arms came into view. Kale loaded extra power cells into his blaster, then handed Lyra a smaller weapon. "You stay behind cover. You shoot if you have to," he said. She nodded, though her hands felt cold. The freighter slid into the station's yawning hangar bay. Inside, the air was stale, lit by dim emergency lights. Broken mining drones floated near the ceiling, their empty eyes glowing faintly. They didn't have to wait long. The enemy cruiser swept in behind them, engines roaring, its landing struts hitting the deck with a metallic slam. The ramp dropped, and the silver-fanged alien stepped out, his war beast beside him. Behind them came 6 armored mercenaries, weapons ready. The alien's voice echoed through the hangar. "You've been a difficult hunt, human, but it ends here." Kale stood in the open, calm as stone. "You're right. It ends here." Alien's smile was sharp. "Kill him. Bring the girl alive." The mercenaries moved first, blaster fire lit the hangar, slamming into crates, walls, and broken machinery. Kale dove behind a heavy support pillar, returning fire with deadly precision. 2 mercenaries dropped before they even reached cover. The war beast roared, charging toward him. Its claws ripped into the pillar, tearing metal like paper. Kale rolled away just in time, firing into its exposed leg joints. The beast howled, but kept moving. its bulk smashing through a line of storage containers. Lyra crouched behind a cargo pod, firing at the mercenaries flanking Kale. Her shots weren't perfect, but she forced them to keep their heads down. The silver-fanged alien didn't rush in. He stood back, watching, confident his beast and men would do the work. Kale saw the opening and moved, sprinting toward a control panel at the far wall. He slammed a lever down, and with a grinding roar, the hangar's heavy blast doors began. Too close. The alien's eyes narrowed. Trap him. The beast lunged at Kale, but this time he was ready. He fired a magnetic charge at the crane overhead. The massive hook swung down, catching the beast's armored collar and yanking it sideways. It roared in rage, thrashing, but the cable held. Kale turned his fire on the mercenaries. Another two fell, their armor smoking. Lyra saw the last pair. Trying to flank Kale again, without thinking, she darted from cover, firing until one went down. The other turned on her, but Kale's shot hit him first. Now only the silver-fanged alien remained. He stepped forward slowly, drawing a long curved blade that gleamed under the hangar lights. Enough of this, he growled. I'll kill you myself. Kale faced him, blaster in one hand, a combat knife in the other. Try. They met in the center of the hangar. The alien's blade slashed in fast arcs, forcing Kale to block and dodge. Sparks flew as metal met metal. Kale countered with quick jabs from his blaster, forcing the alien to twist away. The fight was brutal and close. The alien's strength was monstrous, but Kale's speed and precision kept him alive. A feint to the left, a strike to the ribs, a quick dodge from a killing blow. Both men fought as if nothing else in the world existed. Lyra watched, heart pounding. She wanted to move, to help, but every step felt frozen. Then the alien made his mistake, overextending with a heavy slash. Kale stepped in, driving his knife deep into the alien's side. The silver-fanged alien staggered, his blade clattering to the floor. Kale pulled the knife free, breathing hard. It's over. The alien's golden eyes burned with hatred, not it. With a final burst of strength, he lunged. But Kale fired point blank, the shot hitting center mass. The alien fell, motionless, his body hitting the deck with a hollow echo. The hangar was silent, except for the low hum of the closing doors. The war beast let out a final snarl before collapsing, its lifeless bulk slamming into the floor. Kale turned to Lyra. It's done. She stared at him for a moment, then stepped forward. You didn't just save me, you gave me my life back. He gave a faint, tired smile. Then keep it. Make it yours. The blast doors sealed with a heavy clang. The pilot's voice came over the com. We clear to go? Kale looked at Lyra. She nodded. The freighter lifted from the dead mining. Station engines pushing them into the stars. Ahead lay only darkness and light, danger and freedom. But for the first time since her capture, Lyra felt like she was truly free. And Kale just kept his eyes on the horizon, ready for whatever came next.